So, okay, so to start with, things that strike me about it, that maybe wouldn't strike you if you hadn't been reading Heidegger in this course, is for one thing, that the styles of these people are so different. They all come from very different worlds. And that's sort of interesting because all those worlds are going to get, so to speak, trumped by the world of the feast finally. But that doesn't mean that these people don't that lose those styles. Each one's style is brought out in its own most by the feast. That's one of the things that happens when a thing thinks. Everything involved is brought out at its best. It's and so the sisters with their meek, downcast eyes, that's submissive, accepting everything, and having made sacrifices is one style. Babette, who's proud and looks people in the eye and jokes with and flirts with the merchants and fights with them over the price, which the sisters would never do. The general with his worldly French style, who recognizes good food and good wine and knows what to do and say on every occasion. And then the practitioners are hard to understand what their style is so drab that it's hard to know what it is to bring their drabness out into its own. I mean, they get to be a little more alive by the end. And so now at the dinner, everybody is sort of brought out at their best. The spiritual love of the sisters, the authority of Babette, the knowledge and good manners of the general, and the practitioners becoming as lively and appreciative as they can get. So, so much for the setting. Now, obviously, well, I should say somewhere that there's a kind of ambiguity in what I'm saying because of the way Heidegger sets up things to be really things, like the jug. But it's clear that he would include a celebratory feast. He mentions one at one point as a thing, I believe. At least he should, I think. And anything that does this job of of gathering and opening up a world, or opening up a world and gathering the fourfold, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is a thing. And here's the celebration of the feast, where the jug goes over into the celebration of the feast at the bottom of 172. I mean, in the end, it seems to me it's not the jug, but the occasion in which the people are sitting together, presumably in the Black Forest, drinking the local wine, using the jug, but it's all being pulled together by the occasion, it seems to me, or the event, and the jug is just a part of that. But Heidegger puts a lot of emphasis on the jug as a thing, and it's just going to be a kind of disparity between what I'm going to say, which is more like Borgmann's, where something like the family meal, his example of focal practice, which is his phenomenology of things thinking. I mean, he's a perfect Heidegger book. And I want you to read this partly because I've said I'm a big fan of Borgmann's. He does what I think you ought to do when you read Heidegger. He doesn't sort of wallow around in the jargon. He brings in the phenomena. He lets the text show him to some phenomena which he might not have seen otherwise. That what goes on in the family meal and gardening and playing music together or being a horse person or being what else have you got? Well, having a family meal. Things like that are the phenomena that fill out the text and what Heidegger's pointing to. And then you can go back to the text once you've got the phenomena and read it, and it doesn't seem just like weird words all put together anymore. It seems like a way of talking about something that's important and that nobody has paid any attention to ever in the history of the West. So Borgmann is using these vocal practices and not entities. And notice gardening, playing music together. He's not saying the violin is the same thing presumably, but the quartet. And it isn't the racing shoes that are the thing singing, but the activity of running. So he's transposed it away from the entity into the activity, and I go along with that. And so that feast is my thing, and not the turtle, and not the wine, and not any particular entity or in it. So, and what does it mean then that it gathers the fourfold? Well, I'm going to stick to the movie first. I mean, we've gone to the phenomena, then we can come back and try to generalize. In the movie, the earth seems to be, at that dinner, the sensuous. The food, the wine, the erotic, loving glances. It's a very erotic movie, so nobody even touches anybody, as I recall, in the movie. And but that side of it, that the sort of embodied side of it is I think the earth side of it, and it is sort of hidden in the movie and covered up and concealed. What's out in the open is spiritual love, that which is what they're all sort of showing and talking about, and that the sisters have, and the woman with and the general have, and in that kind of love, that sky kind of love, everything is clear and in a certain way disembodied, because they are always together, the general and the sister, but they never get together bodily. And I think I may have read it. I'm not sure. Did I read my quote for what the sky is in here? Maybe not. It's on 225. I think I might have. He talks about the self-disclosure of the sky when he's talking about poetry. Did I read that? If not, I will read it now. About 15 lines from the bottom, the poet calls in the sights of the sky, that which in its very self-disclosure causes the appearance of that which conceals itself, and indeed as that which conceals itself. Well, the sky is obviously taking the place of world in the story, in the origin of the work of art. It's that which is unconcealed and sort of calling to be unconcealed, it looks like here. That's what sky is here. It's not even doing much calling, I think. It's not. It's just that which is out in the open and manifest. And the spiritual and the sensual are united without a struggle. I mean, that's part of the remembering the thingy. I'm sort of giving you this in bits, but it'll all come together. There is the ringing together, the marriage of the fourfold, not a struggle of the fourfold. And the general says at one point, for this woman, the dinner was a love affair that made no distinction between the sensual and the spiritual. That is, they're ringing together. By the way, I'm quoting from, I could put it on reserve, the Dentist and Babette's Feast, which is remarkable about this movie, and it's so surprising. The world is just full of surprises. You wouldn't think that you could make a very, very good movie just by literally following a story just step by step, showing what it says, and quoting everything that everybody says verbatim. The movie just takes the short story Babette's Feast and does it without any change. So if you want to sort of find out what any of these people said, or when it's important, what they said, or even if it isn't, I guess, everything they said, I think, is just in here. Okay, so the mortal part, I take it, they know it won't last. The general says about that he will sort of always be at dinner with her, but he doesn't mean literally always be at dinner. He means that this moment will have made a difference in his life and his relationship to her. It works here and now for a short time, and it's I said this last time, it's vulnerable, and I'm contradicting something I said. I said that the identities that are brought out there are vulnerable. I'm confused on that subject, I realize. I don't have any examples of things that brings out identities which don't exist outside of the world of the thingy. I mean, when the family meal brings out the family in its own, and fathers and mothers and sons and daughters, all in their own, they're in their identities of fathers and mothers and sons and daughters, and those identities don't go away when the meal goes away. Maybe they're not as rich except during the meal. Huh. Well, I think I'm just wrong. I have no quote, no text to back me up that they're fragile, that the mortals refer to the fragility of the identity. Um, and I don't know what they do refer to. Still don't understand the mortals. What, except for the fact that the dinner itself, I mean, the thing is certainly mortalish, and that it's there for a while, and everybody knows it's not going to last, and nobody's trying to make it last. That's very important. It isn't as if when the dinner is over, it somehow failed to do what a dinner would do at its best, namely last forever. It's built right into things being that they are local and temporary, but I'm not sure that's the mortal. I'm lost. Anybody know what the mortal is? Well, I don't either. So we'll have to remind me. I don't know. Right.
Well, don't you just feel like mortal, like human?
Yes, but what is it about humans? I mean, it isn't that they've got hair and laugh, or I mean, it's got something essential about humans. Oh, you have to have humans. Oh, yes, you have to have humans. Maybe you're onto something important. Maybe but he does say it's very important that they're mortal, that they're finite, that they can die. And so I thought, well, that means that they have to be able to give up their identity as they go from world to world. I'll come back to that. My picture is the following, something like, I'm afraid it's rather old-fashioned and banal, but let's just take the father. We could have taken the mother. Well, let's take the mother. The mother is a jet pilot and a nurturing mother. We'll be far out. And when she's doing her job, and the jet is doing things well, and then jets can think too. Technological things can think. I'll come back to that. But remember that the highway bridge can think. So there, she's got her identity as jet pilot when that's happening. And she could have another identity at home when she's the nurturing mother. And she might have another identity too, going out and perhaps being a politician and getting elected to the local city council or something. And in all those different cases, the mortality consists in that when any one of these things are working, they'll bring out her identity in its sharpest and richest and fullest as a jet pilot or a city council member or a nurturing mother. And it will also be clear that in another context of another world, of another thing, she'll have another identity. And she's not supposed to be trying to hold on to one of them or make one of them last for across all of the world. I guess I still believe that. Yes?
Yeah, I guess I'm not clear what the problem is. It seems I mean, thank you, certainly explicit that being a mortal is being able to die.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find out what die is. Because those
that
are
would be the death of being, I can see that as the death of being. This is not what happens to a general life.
Well, I don't know, maybe it is losing an identity. It's what it isn't, is something like, in being in time anyway, dying is not what happens to you at the end of your life, on your deathbed. It's not croaking, as John Hoagland, a former student of mine, says. And it's not something that's in the future, even. So when I read being in time, I think it means that you have to be ready. You have to hold on to your identity in such a way that you have to realize too that you may have to give it up. That's what it is to be mortal. I mean, that's just my try. But if that's true, then the same thing would certainly bring out that kind of mortality, namely that you have to hold on to your identity, bring it out in its own most, but realize that you shouldn't hold on to it in such a way that you're not ready to give it up and get another one in another world. That's what I'm doing. I mean, that's the best I can do. I'm not, I mean, if somebody does better, I'm open to anybody who can do better. But it's a try. So now divinity is very interesting. So let's go first just to the divinity of, in this. I was really sticking to this term right now. The divinities are at least there. This is I got a new view about divinities. It doesn't contradict the one I had last time. Thursday. And here I want to say, well, at least the divinities is in the speech of the general with a sort of a toast and talking about grace has been poured upon them. And he isn't talking specifically about God or even that. He's being thankful for this occasion. That's working. And so that's part of what the divinities are. Now, do I want to come back to this, or do I want to do it now? I think I might as well do it now. What else are the divinities? Oh, now I have a whole new story to tell about the divinities. That is, that maybe the divinities are the marginal practices left over from other understandings of being that are still around and enable us to participate in, or to preserve, or to help bring off cases of things thinking. Now, I haven't talked about this at all, but let me say a word about it. It looks to me like, though Heidegger never stresses it, that there are various ways of things thinking. They can think in the nurturing style, which is certainly what this dinner is doing, I guess. I'm not even sure which the dinner is in, whether it's in the nurturing, I suppose. But they could also think in a Croesus style, and that would be, I take it, what ponds and trees and herons and deer do at the end. You could also think, though Heidegger doesn't talk about it, in a subject-object style. That would be what a bridge like a railroad bridge, or a good old industrial bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge or something, would do when we come. I'm trying to do too many things at once, and I don't know what order to do this. Well, now that I've got this far, we've got to go to poetry, language, thought, to building, dwelling, thinking, and the story about the bridges, because there you get into something which gives you the idea that there could be these different styles. So you won't lose me. Let me tell you what I think, and then I'll try to spell it out. I think that things can be brought out in various styles using the marginal practices that belong to the poesis days, or to the thesis days, or to the subject-object days, or even to current technological stuff. And those marginal practices are fragments from worlds when there was a one world focused by one God. And these fragments are still called the divinities, because they are leftover bits of other worlds. Now I have to explain that. I'm getting sort of stories within stories in a way that I do not think is elegant. But I'll come back to it. So first I want to say things thing in various styles. Styles draw on various marginal practices. I'll come back to why we might want to call those divinities. But I wanted to illustrate what I mean by thinking in various styles by going to the bridges, because he's got this list of bridges in here, and they are bridges from various styles. Where are they? The bottom starts at 152. Well, yes, the whole bottom paragraph. So the bridges turn out to be something, the middle of the page. It gathers the earth and sky and so forth. He's talking about that. And then he gets on to, are the mortals in there? Yeah, they get to the end of the paragraph. The bridge lets the stream run its course, and at the same time grants their way to mortals so that they come and go from shore to shore. Bridges, I've written something here for the German. Read in many ways. I don't know why I want. That sounds okay to me. Those many ways are going to be the various styles that bridges could do things in. The city bridge leads from the precinct of the castle to the cathedral square. That's the medieval kind of bridge, and that's going to be related to the Christian kind of bridge, I think. The river bridge near the town brings wagons and horse teams to the surrounding village. Well, that is the sort of poesis thing, I think. Or subject-object, I don't know, because the old stone bridge, humble brook crossing, gives to the this is the poesis bridge, maybe, gives to the harvest wagon its passage from the fields into the village and carries the lumber cart, so and so. The highway bridge is tied, and now this is the funny one. The highway bridge is obviously a technological bridge of the fullest sort. The highway bridge is tied into the network of long-distance traffic paced as calculated for maximum yield. So, I mean, there's the clue. I mean, that's the technological bridge. And always and ever differently, the bridge escorts the lingering and hastening ways of men to and fro so that they may get to other banks, and in the end, as mortals to the other side. And now in high arch and low, the bridge gathers. And so first, so there's as many kinds of bridges as there are styles. That's what I want to say there. So poesis bridge, there's a physis bridge, a poesis bridge. The subject-object bridge isn't very clear, but I'm going to use the one that goes from the country, brings the wagons and horse teams to the villages. I don't think that's a very good subject-object bridge. Maybe it's not even supposed to be. I would prefer a railroad bridge, a bridge that's sort of solid and locked in and hard to build. And when it gets there, it really does the job of dominating and controlling and so forth. Maybe he just doesn't mention that kind of bridge. Okay, then he says, at the end of the paragraph, the bridge gathers as a passage that crosses before the divinity. Whether we explicitly think of and visibly give thanks for their presence in the figure of a saint on the bridge, or whether that divine presence is obstructed or even pushed aside. There's no holy in the church, but pushed aside. It's just as much, I think. Now, what I want to say about this is the following, that the divinities might be the various remaining marginal practices that make it possible for us still to experience things in various styles. Now, that seems a sort of crazy idea, and I certainly would never have had this idea. But he does talk that way on page 94 about divinities. You haven't got this. But in talking about what Hölderlin means by divinities, he says that they are, the middle of the page of 94, traces are often inconspicuous and always the legacy of a directive that is barely divine. A directive is very close to a style. A directive is that which you have to conform to and get in tune with. To be a poet in a destitute time means to tend singing to the traces of the fugitive gods. That is why the poet in The World's Night utters the holy. So there is now something like the divine for us anyway is at the top of 95, traces leading to the lost track are well nigh obliterated. The more obscure the traces become, the less we can find them and so forth. But the poet is sensitive to them. Well, that wouldn't be enough, surely, to make my case. But then you add 184, which I mentioned, which is in the letter to the student that he writes at the end of the thing. And then it all comes together, it looks like. The default of God and the divinities is absence. But absence is not nothing. Rather, it is precisely the presence which must first be appropriated of the hidden fullness and wealth of what has been and what thus gathered is presencing of the divine in the world of the Greeks, in prophetic Judaism, in the preaching of Jesus. So it looks like now the leftover practices from when there was a God and it focused the world from the Greeks, from Judaism, from Christianity, are what's there as the divinities when things think. Now, anyway, once upon a time, the divinities weren't there as absent, but were there as full-fledged present, I suppose. Now, no, I don't want to complicate that. That's enough for that. But it does let me understand one strange thing, and this may be, as I said to the TAs, too clever by half. I've always worried when something gets too clever. But I've worried a long time. Why is there no God for the highway bridge? Where's the highway bridge again? 152. Okay. No, and top of 153, remember that somehow the divine presence is pushed aside. The divine presence could be obstructed. I don't know what that is, but even pushed aside. Now, that means that maybe there's only a threefold. when the highway bridge is there, and not a fourfold. Well, you see what could follow from what I said. If the divine are the remnants of previous practices that belong to worlds that had gods once, and we still got the practices that go with the thesis world, poesis world, the Christian world, and and maybe even the subject-object world. I think so. Although, yeah, okay. Anyway, if there was something like a God there, those practices are still around. But for the highway bridge, what you would be using was the technological practice, and they wouldn't be remnants from another world where there had once been a God, and the practices are still around. Because the highway efficiency practices are right here now. You don't need to have these sort of saved divinities. Now, I don't know if that's true. And that was all in the sides. Let me not lose you. I mean, yeah, yeah. Well, the puzzling thing is that it's a thing and it's only a threefold. I mean, I grant you this is extremely puzzling. What do you make of it?
I don't see that that's possible.
Well, what do you think? Is the highway bridge a thing?
It would be the thing so long as one weren't looking at it technologically. It could function as a thing.
Well, but it would have to do the gathering in the way that something which is built for maximum efficiency and so forth does the gathering. Otherwise, it wouldn't be doing it as the highway bridge. So I grant you that the thing should bring together the fourfold. But if you don't need the divinities,
well, I think you do.
Well, the highway bridge. I leave it to you. I mean, I don't have an answer to this, but I'll read it again. That it looks like bridges always are able to bring together the fourfold. 152, wasn't it? Yeah, at the bottom. Okay. The highway bridge has got this totally technological thing. And we're told that now in a high arch, now in a low. The high arch is, I think, the Autobahn Bridge. I'm thinking that he's thinking here of this highway bridge, by the way, is a bridge. I mean, you've got to picture it as a bridge out in the middle of nowhere. It's just a big over some chasm, and but it's not relating some town to some other town. And it's got, let's put with it a whole lot of interchanges, so you can go this way or that way. It's a very flexible bridge. It just allows you access to everything as efficiently as possible. And when you're on it, you're a resource and it's a resource. Now, you wouldn't think that that bridge would be a bridge that gathers. But they all are, and they all have the fourfold. And they all seem to cross before the divinities, except when the divinities have been pushed aside. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, just when you think even the bridge has its divinities, and then it says the bridge, seems to mean all of them, gathers in its own way. I like that. I think each bridge gathers what I think its own way means in the style of something, poesis, creature, so forth. Each bridge gathers in its own way, earth and sky, divinities and mortals. And he just told you that the highway bridge, or at least I'm presuming it's in the highway bridge, where the divine presence has been put aside. Oh, yeah?
It does have, even if divine presence is constructed.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, I read it, and all these bridges do it, even the bridge that has been pushed aside. You think they could be pushed aside on any of these bridges?
Yeah. I mean, from the context, that the divinities still went past before the divinities, even where we think, I guess, whether they've been pushed all the time, even then.
What does that mean?
Well, it's their default.
In their house? Yeah. Oh, that's what you think. Yeah. Okay.
So in the highway, even if it's pushed all the time, you can see the divinities in the highway bridge as well.
What divinity are you going to see in it if you see it as a thing?
What divinity? The divinities.
Okay, but what divinities?
Well, what is it? It's not the gratefulness, the sense of
okay, well, that's
being simply an object or or not being simply
That only, to me, that only complicates the problem, because if you're really going across the highway bridge as a good resource, using a good resource and are very flexible, I doubt if, I don't picture you having any gratitude.
that thing won't be thinking. Yeah.
Oh, I believe it will.
Okay.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Only the great is on a special line. Then the more people are the lords of the earth. Maybe you think of our people as grateful. When we think we're grateful for their demonstrated.
I think that's interesting.
I don't think it's that.
I don't know if anybody feels that, but maybe they, if they don't feel it, maybe it's not thinking it. And if they do feel it, grateful that this, the Golden Gate Bridge is a subject-object kind of bridge, but it's a very nice sort. But it's a big, hard job, and it's very stable, and it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. It just gets you from one place to another place, but that's good, because that's the places you want to get from and to. It reunites them, the two banks, all of this, and you're grateful that there is such a thing. Grateful to the workers and the designers and the material that was able to do it and all that. Yeah.
At least, I mean, this only occurred to me because it's more inductive. It's not grateful to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that they're able to do it is what I, yes.
Well, but you don't even have to locate it again, sort of that.
Okay, good. Not that they're able to do it, but that's the task and span. You're grateful that you can get efficiently, or if not efficiently, well, whatever the previous stage was, directly or something from one side to the other. Okay, so I'm going to give up. It was too clever by him. You should be very careful of that. I suspected it wasn't right. Okay, so now what have we got? The divinities are, I'm not taking that back because I was reading that. The divinities are what's left of the practices from other times, which are marginal now, which had God centering them once, and which still can work to bring out a thing thinking, each in its own way, that is, with each of the different styles that are still available in our culture. That's part of the divinities. And you can be grateful for that. And moreover, you could be grateful for whatever it is that this particular object is doing for you. Is that what you think? Is that all right? Yeah.
When you talk about the early Greeks, things for them.
Yes.
They didn't have marginal, like previous.
Oh, well, there, the divinities would be much more immediate, I think. I'm talking about, yeah, how things thing once they're gone. In any given, well, that's when I muttered to myself, I don't think I better talk about this. You've now brought it up. It's puzzling to what extent things think in a time when there is a big deal divinity, a temple or a cathedral or a creator God or a transcendental subject that is making everything intelligible and shining very brightly. It's, if things thing at all, they do it in a marginal, very unimportant, humble way. But what's really important is serving God or whatever it is that the big deal thing says. So maybe you're right on a track.
Couldn't think if there was still a work of art.
Well, you're on a very interesting track. Put it off until next time. But I do think that it's that they are, as they say in science, conjugate variables. The more there's a big thing, the less the little things can think, and the more that you get rid of the big thing, the more the little things can think. And therefore, what are you concluding? Why did you say this? Where did this come back? Therefore, you brought this in as part of the fourfold.
Questioning a little bit how it is.
Divinities. Okay. Yes, you were asking how things. Right. Yeah, that's fine. If there are divinities from previous marginal practices, is okay. What you were asking is that when those marginal practices were central and not marginal, then what would be the divinity in the thing?
Right.
And what you get to is.
Then you get that weak.
Yeah.
You have a previous one.
Right. Yeah. Or even any of them, really, when they've got some big mainline practices anyway. You've got two questions. We'll put them both aside. What about the time when there aren't any marginal practices from previous stages like the Greeks? And what about the time when there are, but they're really very marginal and people don't need to have them because they've got the mainline ones that are still doing the job of gathering for them. Okay, yeah, let's put that aside till next time. That's hard. Let's go back to easy things. Okay, so we've done the sky, the earth, the sky, the mortals, and the divinities in the movie and in general. I'm not going to come back to them, I think, because we ended up saying all it could say about it. And the next point is that there's no struggle in the movie or in general. When a thing, it's like a marriage. Remember that we talked about the sensual and the spiritual are just put together in the dinner. In general, the four factors all fit together perfectly in a kind of marriage, in a kind of ringing that reconciles all opposites. I've said there's something that the general says something interesting about that. On 59 is the copy that I have, which I put on reserve, and he says, "Mercy and truth, my friends, have met together," said the general. "Righteousness and bliss shall kiss one another." This is just another sub-case of what looks like oppositions all reconciled. Yeah.
You said this last time, but just the oppositions are reconciled without collapsing into
each other. Right, that's right. The oppositions are preserved, not merged, but they all support each other instead of struggle with each other. And then you get the idea that when that's all working right, the thing shines. Heidegger says that, talking about things shining at the end of the thinking. We'll come back to the shining in a minute, but just to show you, this is very much like what happens in the movie. I mean, this is where I think that Denise Denson must have read Heidegger. The next two things she dramatizes them in such a bizarre way that who would have even thought of it? Here's the paragraph. Whatever becomes a thing occurs out of the ringing of the world's mirror play. Only when all of a sudden, presumably world whirls as a world. Presumably? I don't know why it's world whirls as a world. Only then does the ring shine forth, the joining from which the ringing of earth and heaven, divinities and mortals, achieves that compliancy of a simple oneness. Okay, two things. Shining. His idea is that when the work of art is, when the thing is really thinging, it's shining. We see everything in the light of it. It's shining in a somewhat similar way to the way the work of art shines. I'll get back next time to the similarities and difference between things and works of art. But the shining is really remarkable. I don't know how many of you noticed this when we saw the movie. I didn't until I read it. They didn't remember much of that evening, it says. None of the guests had any clear remembrance of it. They only knew that the rooms had been filled with a heavenly light, as if a number of small halos had blended into one glorious radiance. So there was shining going on. And of course, in this incredibly weird way, there was ringing going on when they go out and dance in the circle at the end around the well or something. Why do they do that? I don't know. But it seems to be the version, a kind of expression of this ringing. But what the ringing is really about, the ringing is only a metaphor, that they don't have to dance in a circle. The ringing is about the self-containedness of the event of a thing. Now, what do I mean by that? That's important. That means that inside it, remember, all the social concerns are irrelevant. I mean, it just is not proper to be talking about whether we should bomb in Yugoslavia in the middle of Babette's speech. Only the people, each brought out in their own, and their relationships brought out in their own, is relevant there. And only the past in those people's lives that have to do with their gathering and their relationship is relevant. And nothing else is relevant. So it has a kind of that circular thing in which it's self-contained. 174. It's got a single time space, a single stage, says that deadline. And what I take that to be is nearness. That is, nearness finally is what's missing. Remember, he says, is nearness. But when the thing things, then there is nearness. Why is there nearness? Because the distinction, it isn't a spatial kind of nearness, though they all happen to be in the same room. That's not the point. You could be in the same room and there wouldn't be any nearness. The nearness is that it makes a self-contained world in which it's clear what's inside it, and the farness is everything else, which is outside it. When you get that, that's when you got it all put together. I was going to find a nearness quote, but I guess I don't have it here. Where are we going to get to nearness? The ringing is on page 180. There ought to be a lot of talk about nearness, but I don't know where it is. Here it is, at the top of 178. Oh yeah, I did read this. Nearness preserves farness. That means, drawing a distinction in this circle between what's inside it also makes clear what's outside it. Preserving farness, I said all this is badly translated, and I reread it the way it is in German. Preserving farness, preserving farness, the near in its nearness. Preserving farness. The near is, that is base, in its, that is essence, in its nearness. That's all. Nearing is the work of bringing near as the thinging of the thing, he says next. All of this has got to do with this self-enclosedness of it. Okay, one more thing now. And then I'm going to come back to this. But it's interesting to me in the movie that it seems that the thing does, the dinner, Babette's feast, what the old minister could never do. Actually gather these people together into a loving community where they would all be brought out in their best. It seems that as far as one can tell, they've always been bickering and cheating on each other and generally causing lots of trouble, ever since it started. That is, it didn't work. And Christianity didn't do the job, but the Babette's feast pulled them together. That is, it's the minister's words, mercy and truth and righteousness and wisdom kiss one another. But it didn't look like they did it. So what does that mean? Well, it means, I think, that what you can have that really works is this kind of focal, local world that the thinking can produce. It's sort of the Christian community deontologized. What happened is the Christian community got too mixed up with metaphysics and a lasting God and sort of requirement of loving your neighbor, where that means everybody all over. Nearness and farness disappears when everybody's your neighbor. And so Christianity didn't bring it off, but this does. And somebody pointed out to me last time I taught this, I don't know if it's true, I wanted to go back and count, but I forgot, that there are 12 people at the dinner. Is that right? If so, it's the right version of the Last Supper. And maybe the Last Supper was like this too, I think, but it certainly didn't work for long in Christianity. But now it works here. Let's see. And it's got to be able to sense that this is a local world that lasts for a while, and there'll be other worlds and other communities. The Christians lost that in a hurry, and of course, Peter went out and converted everybody. Was it Peter or James? Somebody that you could have circumcision of the heart. You didn't need real circumcision, and so anybody could be a member. They have to be Jewish, and pretty soon it loses its local temporary character if it ever had it. And that's what Heidegger wants to get back. Yeah.
Just the thing I want to ask about is, because in the film, there's at the dinner, there's a point where the general says that the queen reads the minister's sermons. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that.
I guess the reason why I'm asking that is because it seems like the farness and what's far and what's local are somehow brought together in a way where the far doesn't threaten any longer compromise the intimacy of what's local. And I guess what I'm reacting to is a minute ago when you were saying no one sits at the dinner table and talks about whether to bomb Yugoslavia or not. But it seems like at that dinner, that kind of discussion can take place, but it has a different character about it. Like when he references the queen, like there's a thing that he wants to bring in that, you know what I'm saying? That,
yeah, I suppose if it's somehow made relevant to that intimate gathering, anything can be brought in. But it can't just be something that the community cares about or the current events happening and so forth. Yes, so for instance, if you're going to bring out children in their own, it may turn out that what the child has just been doing at school or on their horse in their horse jumping is going to turn out to be relevant at the dinner, right? But yeah, okay. But
that needs to happen in a way that doesn't first the journey.
that's right, and doesn't it doesn't make the distinction, and it doesn't get rid of the distinction between the nearness and the farness. That's what we all want to say. That's what you really have to preserve it. Okay, let's see what else. So it's local, it's temporary, doesn't set up one long-term world. It doesn't produce meaningful differences. It doesn't produce stable long-term identities. It doesn't have a struggle, and it doesn't produce history. And therefore, it doesn't deny the possibility of other worlds, the way any particular big field world that defines an understanding of being for everybody everywhere does. So that's the first pass, I think. We're going to come back to some of these things. Everybody okay about it so far? Yeah.
It's the Last Supper.
It is if, and I think it's a great question. I mean, if you think at the Last Supper that they understood that this was just for them as a local group with their God and their kind of love and so forth, it could be a certain thing. As soon as they think metaphysically that this is the truth, this is the revelation of the true creator God, and we should love our neighbors everywhere and convert everybody everywhere, the nearness and farness is gone.
Isn't that also
Well, yes, it'll turn into history, but it's no longer a thing thinking, right? It will turn into Jesus, the God-man, the center of history, the fullness of time, the new way of being, and so forth. And if that's what the Last Supper was about, then it was not a thing thinking. It was a piece of him as a work of art working. Yeah.
I mean, could it be a thing thinking that then gets taken up and transmuted into a work of art?
Yeah. And in Heidegger thinking, at least late Heidegger thinking, sort of misunderstood and distorted into a work of art because it's too metaphysical. I mean, there are good works of art and bad works of art in this, to put it sort of crudely. The Greek temple and the 5th century people didn't claim that the temple was forever and for everybody. But as soon as you think that what the temple is doing is sort of representing an eternal truth for everybody everywhere, then you're in metaphysics, and then works of art. They're still works of art, the medieval cathedral, for instance, but it's lost a very important feature of it, namely that it understood that it was a mode of revealing, or at least, yes, that remember we've gone through this. We talked about this today too, the teaching assistant, all these things come back. It seems that Heidegger has to think, and maybe he does think, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, that only once, sort of in the history of the world, has there been, or at least of the West, I mean, I don't know what he thinks of, he doesn't think about what Native Americans knew, but, or Bali people. But anyway, only once in the history of the West. No, it couldn't happen anywhere but in the West, because it's got to do with history. Only once in the history of the West, and only the West has history, was there a work of art working which didn't deny that it was a temporary mode, that it was a mode of revealing, which only lasted as long as it was preserved by the preservers, and didn't correspond to the truth about reality. Because as soon as you get to Plato in correspondence, or Aristotle in correspondence, wherever it starts, the work of art business is over. So, and that's about what we said, right? I don't think.
But you didn't say when that was.
When? You mean when? 500 BC? Yeah. I mean, yeah. 500 BC, at the time of the Oresteia, at the time of the Greek temple, they had, we've talked about this, a sense of being as a gift and as a mode of givenness, and of their role as preservers, and of the whole truth as the revealing and not as correspondence. And only then did the work of art work in its fullest form. And why was that the work of art at its best? Because that's what's really happening. It is always a mode of revealing focused in a work of art, but no other work, every other work of art covers that up. And not even the Greek temple showed it, as far as I know. I think we'd have to go back and read it to see if the temple shows that it's created and needs preservers. Doesn't it? Pretty sure it shows it created it and it shows it needs preservers. So the Greek temple comes close to showing that it's the center of a mode of revealing. It just doesn't interrogate it, and it doesn't make it somehow important. It just happens that way, and they're sensitive to it that way, like the Oresteia. I mean, it's so. Yes, the Oresteia has the most clear sense of the fact that it only works while we're preserving. That's the crucial thing, by the way. Let me just say that one more time. That as soon as you've got a correspondence store, then that understanding of being, that as focused in that work of art, doesn't need us. It just is there. I mean, that's how it is. Everything is created, or everything is techne, or everything is whatever it is. It doesn't require to be safeguarded, nurtured, preserved, and all of that. And so as soon as you get to the correspondence stuff, the importance of our role as preservers and receivers of disposing is just gone. That's clear in Heidegger. Okay, let's go back to this. Yeah, Ford. Okay, good. Not acknowledged. It's never gone, because these are modes of revealing, and we are preservers, right? We don't anymore understand ourselves as preservers, right? And that means we act differently. I mean, we don't go around trying to nurture these things and being grateful for them. We may go around instead trying to convert everybody to them because we believe they're right. Okay, then let me do the next thing. So again, with the help of the CAs, we've worked out a question of sort of the various stages, or the various, I don't know what stages isn't the right way to put it, but how can the various ways of thinking things.
I don't know, it's the various circumstances.
Okay, the various
thing might.
Yeah, the various circumstances that things thing in the various ways, or something. And that's the wrong kind of thing, ways. Go ahead, yeah.
The question whether things sung in each of these.
Okay. Well, okay, there are four cases, let's call them, and we can ask whether they're things thinking. They're all related to things. Keep in mind the Borgman-like stuff, the culture of the table, gardening, music, and so forth. And then you can see that it can be concealed. Where's the concealed quote? We talked about it this morning, and I also was thinking about it.
170.
Okay, on 170, he talks about never comes to light.
The thingness of the thing remains concealed.
The nature of the thing never comes to light. Okay, that can happen. Then when the thing is concealed and forgotten, that can happen in various ways, at least two ways that I could think of. One is, it might be, as our conversation suggested, that when there's a big, glorious work of art working and shining, and everybody is understanding everything in terms of that, the distinction between nearness and farness goes away, and everything is sort of in one big world, organized by one work of art, and then it would be that then the humble thing and its little world would be concealed and forgotten. That's one way to do it. I think what Heidegger is more likely to be thinking of here is that in a world of efficiency, in a world where everything is challenged for, to be as flexible as possible, and nothing has a nature to nurture anyway, then things thinking which are inefficient, on the one hand, with the family meal. Think of the difference between the family meal, Borgman goes into this, and the disaggregated technicity meal, where everybody can have their television dinner, they can eat their meals anywhere, anytime, in any order, all by themselves, in front of their television, and so forth. And that challenging force is an assault on things, I would say. That means that if you really make efficiency the ultimate, there's not going to be any nature of a meal or any nature of anybody else either to bring out in the meal. And that's the way then things, I think, will have turned into devices to talk like board time. And the possibility of things singing is concealed. So there isn't anything singing at all. Are they still singing? Well, I would say the possibility of things is, there's no thing singing. What do you think?
Well, he says, it sounds like, in a sense, if the thing in it, thingness, right, is not being concealed. Which makes it sound like
the nature of the thing never comes to light, never gets a hearing. This is what we mean by the annihilation of the thing. I think it means that things never get the chance to think. Don't you know?
And as long as they're concealed, then they're not
doing it. Right. They're supposed to shine and gather, and if they're concealed and nobody's getting gathered, I think they're not thinking. You, John, was saying that? Oh, okay. That's the first case. The first case is when they're blotted out. And you can ask yourself, surely technology is trying to blot them out. And whether they were blotted out in other ways, Heidegger doesn't say. Now, then comes the three other ones. There are four in all. And those three are the ones, all of which things are thinking sort of. One is, you've got a way of life that has a place in it for things, a readiness for things. So the jug is on the shelf and the good silverware and the tablecloth are put away. You've got the skills and you know the occasion when you would have a celebratory meal. And we've got the practices for that. So somehow those things around aren't annihilated. They're just kind of standing by. And I don't think they're thinking when they're standing by like that, but they are ready to think. And then the next one is, we just do it. We have a celebratory meal. By the way, we aren't celebrating, it seems to me, if we're consistent, something like the 4th of July, where you're celebrating some common thing that with everybody else in your culture or in your society. And I was puzzling about Thanksgiving. I don't know whether it's a funny kind of meal which is celebrating the same thing that everybody's celebrating, but it looks like a good thing. What?
Well, it seems like there are two ways you might do any of these. One is sort of as a national holiday, right? The other is sort of
Family event.
It's marked in the calendar for.
Right. Right. It's harder to have a 4th of July, I think, family event somehow. It's so, because it's, defined as what it is the celebration of the public thing. Whereas Thanksgiving isn't so mainly a celebration of the fact that the pioneers, the pilgrims sat down with the Indians and had turkey. It's supposed to be a gratitude for something. So you can certainly do your Thanksgiving dinner as a thing. Anyway, and when you do that, and you do it well, it can be either a family meal or a meal that is celebrating something inner. That feast, interestingly enough, is what? On the birthday of the founder, right? But it doesn't really have anything to do, it turns out, with the founder. It turns out that it's got this self-contained character in which the birthday of the founder doesn't make any difference. And remember, the people in the feast, I forgot to say this, are busy trying not to enjoy the food and to follow what they think is the guidance of the founder. But more and more they forget the rules of the founder, who's very austere and aesthetic, and they forget that they're not supposed to enjoy the food, and they start doing this other thing. Yeah.
Yes, something important that they were different.
That's right.
And one thing I love about the movie is that when they were enjoying it, they just didn't say all the same things they'd ever said before. Is that they were able to display.
You mean their old quarrels were all there and everything, but all somehow forgiven and accepted and integrated. Yeah.
And to us, it's clear, spectators, that they disavow their pleasure on the one hand, but they avow it.
Right. Well, they forget. Somehow. Yeah, I would say, but I was saying the same thing. It's supposed to be celebrating the birthday of the founder. If it did, it wouldn't have the kind of nearness that it did have. But the founder just gets left outside, and the the gathering of that group gets to be what matters to them. Okay, so anyway, and it shines. We're back to that again. So the third, remember we got one where the work of art is really annihilated. Then the thing is annihilated. Second, we've got the case where it's sort of on hold, and we're ready, and it's in our practices, but we're just not doing it. Then there comes the one where it's shining, and we are really seeing it and absorbed in it. Then comes an interesting one that he's talking about in building, dwelling, and thinking. Building, it looks like, is forming the practices that make it possible for things to think. So let's stick to dinners. Practices that tell you when it's the right time to have the dinner, and you know how to cook the food, and you know how to place the guests, and you know all the things that say Mrs. Ramsey knows into the lighthouse. You know how to make a dinner as really a dinner, and that's the deep meaning of building. I take it, and Borgman calls that cultivating the practices that make it possible for there to be focal practice. So you've got to know a lot about music to be able to be part of a quartet, or a lot about gardening in order to be gardening. And that's Heidegger, oddly enough, calls it building. He says it's the old deep meaning of building. Well, what's dwelling? That's the funny one, and that's what we're coming to now. Dwelling is when it, and he's got this pun in German on wohnen, which is dwell, and gewöhnlich, which is customary. Dwelling is when you are so good at things that you can just do it without even making a fuss about it, I think. Now, consider the family meal. There is the big deal meal where the light shines and where everybody is in it, like in Babette's feast, and it only happens once in a while, and everybody knows what a rare occasion it is. But if you're just going to have the family dinner, what is the culture of the table, as Borgman calls it, if you have a family dinner every day, or even every Sunday, let's say every Sunday noon at least, the whole family gets together and does one of these things. After a while, they get so good at it that it becomes part of this, what is sort of customary and in the background. They just dwell in it. They take it for granted, and that's all right. That's in fact, I take it the way Heidegger would like it to be. Every once in a while, all of a sudden, something shines. Remember, he says, but I take it that we don't have to wait for this sudden thing where the ring shines forth. That's on 182. That was my third time. There is a way in which things sing even when we don't notice it. We just dwell with it. At least that's how it looks to us. So after that, have I done justice to it?
So they are singing in the fourth case,
yes,
even if they're not shining.
Yes, that's right. A distinction between the shining occasion when it's really sort of got our full attention and we're totally taken up in it, and much more ordinary occasions. Because I think Heidegger would like to think that in the world, lots of the time, just because we are dwelling and have cultivated the habits, namely building, things are just singing off in a normal sort of way. That's how I picture it. Yeah, B.
There's we quote on 181 that when and what way things appear as things, but they don't appear without the vigilance of mortals.
Ah, that's good. I like that. Doesn't bother me, but I'm glad you read it. I would have read it. So what is the vigilance of mortals? I don't think that's sort of watching for them to shine and saying, wow, when they do. I think that's thinking. Building. That's building. The vigilance of mortals is cultivating the skills and practices that make it possible to have things singing at all. I take it it's the Borgman picture. Vigilance is the same as, well, where do we get this whole list of things? Let's look at it's in building, dwelling, thinking, I think, of nourishing, protecting, watching out for, where he's talking about dwelling, and man has to learn Here it is on 151. Well, let's see where this takes us. Well, that makes the cultivating dwelling turns out to be. I'm not sure now what's happening. Cultivating, I'm at the end of the second paragraph, and construction are building in the narrowest sense. Dwelling, insofar as it keeps or secures the fourfold, is and is keeping a building. So he's going to bring dwelling and building together. But building ought to be maybe that's not the best quote. I want it to be cultivating and vigilant and so forth. Where does he first tell us about building? Here it is on 147. That's what I wanted. There we are. Okay, building turns out. Now let me remember what we're answering. Does I think vigilance equal building? Although I don't have any evidence for it, but that is sort of being ready for things thinking. And now let me read what happens here. The old word bauen, which means that says that man, so far as he dwells, means at the same time to cherish. This is all this nurturing talk. This thing that we're free to do. And remember, in Borgman language, cultivate focal practices. Cherish, protect, preserve, and care for. Till the soil, cultivate the vine. Such building only takes care. It tends to growth that ripens into the fruit of its own accord. Building is the sense of preserving. There we are, preservers again. And nurturing is not making anything. Okay, so I think building as nurturing is building as having and keeping up on these practices that enable these things to do it. And I think that's the same as vigilance, so I couldn't prove it. Anybody doubt it? I mean, unless you doubt it, let's say that it's okay. Now let me see. Well, I had a lot of board lining here just at this point, so maybe I should just go on with this. So I take it you read this and it's so straightforward. You got it that there is things like. But let's just go through for a minute a big example, his best example, that the fireplace is a focal thing. And in the fireplace, which is literally the foyer, which is literally the focus, it once held together the family who had to have the skill for chopping the wood, for bringing it in, for keeping the fire going, and for getting up and starting it again. And they cooked around the fire, and they studied around the fire, and they got married in front of the fireplace, and the household gods were around the fire. And all of that is just the opposite of the central heating system, where bit by bit technological devices take over, which efficiently and flexibly give you just the heat you want, when you want it, and where you want it, are utterly better as far as providing the commodity you wanted, namely heat, than the focal thing, and a lot easier. And that's why they're so dangerous, and so attractive. It's just fascinating how the central heating just gets rid of it all. You could still, it's so funny to me, my daughter always sat and studied in front of the heat vent in the floor. It was sort of pathetic, where the heat draft, and she had all her toys and dolls and books and everything. And she had a little corner that was the pathetic remains of the foyer. But of course, the central heating in the floor, well, some did, they'd be radiant heating in the floor. Then she wouldn't even have a place even to go and sit in front of, because it'll just disappear. A device just gives you heat, and it gives it to you, and the thermostat does the work of getting it where you want it, when you want it, and it comes out all over the floor. No heat vent. That's not very perfect yet. And then you've lost it. The fireplace is gone. So but you can do something else for one thing. You can't get back the fireplace. I mean, that would be a little bit. You could, but it would be pretty strange. Central heating is just so much more attractive and does the job so much better. But you could do it with it. You can save the dinner from the fast food people. Yeah.
he does say that, you know, a lot of places have a fireplace, right? But if it's not working.
That's right. He doesn't. That's right. You don't cook in front of it. You don't. The family doesn't meet in front of it. You don't have to have these skills to keep it going. You just, yeah. So you can have a fireplace. And the little things he says are pathetic remains. The family pictures are still on the mantelpiece where the family gods were. It's still somehow tiny bit, but it doesn't work anymore. And he's not going to try to revive it. But he's got a better taste with the meal because he thinks that you will see the difference is, I'm just thinking out loud, I had never thought about this before. The difference is that there's nothing wrong with the heat that you get from the radiant heating in the floor. Why would you want to go back to all the work and the unevenness and the non-flexibility of the fireplace? But so his meal story is much better. There's something really wrong with the TV dinners and the Big Mac. They just aren't. There's so much of what goes into a really nice dinner with your family or friends that's missing when everybody goes out and flexibly eats this grabbable and gulpable food, that the more that happens, the more that he thinks dinners shine, now in his sense of shining, which is not quite the same as Heidegger's sense of shining, namely, look attractive to us and make it seem worthwhile to bother to have a tablecloth and to bother to get all the family to eat at the same time and bother to cook the food and so forth. That is worthwhile. And that's what you've got to cultivate when he's talking about that on 204, when he's talking about the great meal of the day and how that's got a certain quality which he describes very well as opposed to the food industry. And then he goes into TV dinners, talks about them very well. But I'm trying to get to something else. But just on 205, this is why meals are different than fireplaces, because he says, it's about 5 lines down, but having gotten along for a time and quite well, it seems, on institutional and convenience food, scales fall from our eyes when we step up to a festively set family table. The food stands out more clearly, the fragrances are stronger. To understand the radiance and wealth of a festive meal, we must be alive to the interplay of things and humans and so forth. But what I was going to talk about is his sense of the building, what Heidegger calls building, cultivating the necessary practice. He's got it sort of spelled out on 207. On the spur of the moment, we normally act out of what has been nurtured in our daily practices, as they have been shaped by the norms of our time. And then he tells us how the bad way that is, and so forth. We get sink into our technological comfortable chairs and so forth. But then he says, the human ability to establish this in the first full paragraph and commit oneself to a practice reflects our capacity to comprehend the world, to harbor it, this is Heidegger taught, in its expanse of a context that is oriented by its focal points. To found a practice is to guard a focal concern, to shelter it against the vicissitudes of faith and our frailty. And and that is building. It's exactly what Heidegger's saying on 147, which I just read, where building is preserving, caring for, cherishing. I think, anybody want to say anything? That's a place to stop. I want to talk next time about the difference between things and works of art. And yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm trying to decide whether for next time we're going to go on to languages. I don't think so. That would be confusing. No, just keep reading the Borgman and Building, Dwelling, Thinking, and the Thing essay, reading them with the new issues that we've raised in mind. Yeah.
But the next thing we read out.
Yes, the next thing for next week is what I passed out to you. But first we're going to read language, which is in here, and then we're going to read on the way to language. The next 2 weeks are language. And then, did I tell you we did get the bitrate? Have I told you that? I don't think I told you. We're going to get a big chunk of this unpublished Heidegger mystery masterpiece, and that's what we're going to read during the last 2 weeks. Okay, having made all those important announcements, we're now ready to turn to the text. Don't forget, these are the things that I told you. Okay, now we're going to go on to Building, Dwelling, and Thinking, which is written 2 years after the essay on the Thing, and in some ways, I think, has gotten better about certain issues. But in general, I must say I was disappointed rereading it today I was hoping to get more support out of it for the view I think it holds than I can. So I'm going to have to put a rather heavy interpretation on it to make it interesting. And I'm not sure whether it supports it or not. But at least we can start as a kind of review of the fourfold to just getting clearer about the fourfold, because it seems to me that Heidegger's gotten a lot clearer about the fourfold. So let's start on 150 with the mortals. They're always so hard. Now, it looks a little more like what I wanted to say on the second paragraph on 150. Okay, the mortals are the human beings. That's fine. They're called mortals because they can die. Well, we don't know what that means yet. That means to be capable of death as death. Well, now comes the part that I said, but wasn't very clear in thinking. But that's got, I would say, to put it extremely, nothing to do with what happens to people on their deathbed when they're croaking. I said that, but it didn't have much text to back it up. I just said that's how it was in Being in Time. But it's even clearer here than in Being in Time when he says only man dies, and indeed continually. Well, you've got to ask yourself, what in the world can that be? It doesn't mean that you're just getting old and gradually shriveling up and will eventually come to an end. It means that there's something that you do all the time as a mortal, and either you hide it or you are in touch with it. But as long as he remains on earth, under the sky, before the divinities, that is, while he's doing that, man is dying. And it has nothing to do, he says at the top of 151, nor does it mean to darken dwelling by blindly staring towards the end. I mean, it has nothing to do with the end, I don't think. The end is something in the future, and dying is whatever it is happening right now. And so, what is it then? Well, he doesn't give you much help. But at least there's no more talk about being and nothing, which is Being in Time talk that was there in the thing singing. So what is it? Well, all I can think of is it's a way of living such that you have an identity which you are always ready to give up for another identity. Certainly, if you're going to let yourself be pulled into various worlds in which you will have different identities. Remember my mother, who is also a jet pilot, is going to have very different identities in the different worlds where things are thinking. And that means you would hold on to each of these identities while you were in them in a different way.